Sunday Assembly Detroit. How's everybody doing? Good, good. Glad to hear it.
Wonderful. How are you, Joe?
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah. No, speak up, Joe.
Anybody else besides Anthony can't hear me? So yeah, we've come here today to a little bit of a change up speed a little bit compared to our usual assemblies. Try and get together and celebrate life a little bit. And we kind of feel like sometimes one way of recognizing the light of life and celebrating it is to contrast it with the recognition that it's the only life that we know we have.
Nice to see you.
If this is your first time here at Sunday Assembly Detroit, we have a motto that we try to live by: live better, help often, wonder more. This is kind of the mantra that was passed on to us by the founders from London, a couple comedians, other guys. Outline of the program we have for you today is we'll have a gathering statement, a little bit of uplifting news, knock a little bit of business out of the way, then a speaker before getting into our Q&A, a reading, moment of wonder. Anthony will have a couple of announcements, and then we will break for lunch before doing our Life Happens. So the gathering, we've gathered here today to celebrate our one life that we know we have, and we are going to do that by delving in a little bit to the existential topics that make life worth living, making sure that we live passionately in the here and the now, because we don't know how much longer we all have here. I think I've got a little bit of a little more in my statement for later, but so some uplifting news kind of on the topic. I know a lot of people in the Detroit area like to get down on the city because we have a reputation for being a little bit violent, crime and all that. I mean, you guys know all the stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
Well, I chose for our uplifting news, I found a news article in, I believe it was the Detroit Free Press, where they were talking about how Detroit is actually declined on its metrics of violent crime, so homicides, stuff like that, as to the lowest rate that it's been in 60 years. So, anybody who wants to talk crime, shout out to Detroit, right? So for the address, I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit about what we've been doing behind the scenes. We've been busy at work trying to. We have some big opportunities in the near future. We have for not 2024, but in 2025, we have a bid to be the assembly that hosts the annual conference, the national conference. So to that end, we're going to be, hoping to ramp up our volunteer base so that we can, handle the workload basically that's going to be required to bring everybody to us for a change instead of having to go out to them. In particular, we were looking for some help with social media. I have all of this. I'm working on doing actual proper job analyses to let you know how many hours of a commitment it'll be per month. We try and keep it reasonable, literally single digit number of hours for each of these positions, because we're all volunteer run, donor based. So we're not in the business trying to overwhelm our volunteers, but we are going to need some help if we want to make a go, at running that. We also have, if anybody's got any particular skills with, the Microsoft ecosystem. We need some help there, just on some of our back-end stuff. If that's your skill set, let me know. Like I said, I've actually got sheets, written out with what exactly we need, what skills. We've also, Victoria was hoping to get a little bit of help. She's our communication director. So if you have any skills relating to, Laura is our communication director, my bad.
Don't get your ladies mixed up.
Yeah, I know, right? If you have any skills related to like Canva for like our design stuff that we put on all of our social media, or some of those other social media, like our Meta, or back-end stuff on Meta, or our Meetup. Right. And then with that, I would like to get into the introduction of our speaker for today. Our speaker is Mary Bochinski. She is a CRNA, Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist, with 10 years of experience dealing with both pediatric and adult populations. She is a very active member of the Michigan Association of Nurse Anesthetists, and she is currently a fellow at Children's Hospital of Michigan downtown in Detroit. And it just so happens she's also my wife. So I'd like everybody to give a warm round of applause to Mary Bochinski.
As the harvest season ends and we approach the winter solstice, we'll take some time today to reflect on death. My hope is that our reflection today can give value to our lives and inform how we choose to live them. Thank you. You guys want to hear me? I have no conflict of interest to disclose in the context of this presentation. I did want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. I take a moment before we begin to acknowledge that this subject matter can be kind of difficult to consider sometimes. Some of us may have lost loved ones, pets, maybe closely considering our own mortality. These are valid feelings, and I trust everyone knows this is a safe place that you can share any emotions if you feel like you want to. I've also provided a few resources on this slide. I can come back to it later if you guys need to see. If anyone finds themselves having a difficult time dealing with heavy topics like this one. So what is death? Let's start by defining death. According to the dictionary, death is the action or fact of dying or being killed, the end of the life of a person or organism. I like this definition. It seems to kind of cover what is considered when you just think of death, when you first think of death. This image is the first image that pops up on Google when you look at the definition, which I kind of thought was fitting. I kind of like how we personify death in the Grim Reaper. It kind of seems like it's kind of a universal thing. People who are religious do it, people who are lay people do it. So let's look a little deeper. The second definition comes from the National Institute of Health and seeks to define death from a medical perspective. States that this one looks closer to how I think of death as a medical professional and also legally how we define death. It covers two factors: cardiac death, which is an individual who has sustained either irreversible cessation of circulatory and respiratory functions, and then brain death, which is irreversible cessation of all functions of the entire brain. I'd like to try and combine these definitions into what an average person would consider death. Let's say an average person would define death as when the body has ceased to function properly and an individual may lack the mental functioning that they previously possessed to such a severe degree that they're no longer remotely themselves. In other words, when a person loses what makes them a unique individual. Would anyone have anything to add to that, or pretty much covers it?
Just real quick, it seems to me that it's very clear it's simply the brain, because I can have whatever is going on with the rest of my body, but if the brain's gone, then the person's gone.
Exactly, yeah, and that's why I like the second definition too, because it kind of separates them, but you're right, and you can have a cardiac function, but...
There's already thousands of people that have artificial hearts.
Yes. Yeah, and I was going to get into some of the medical stuff that we can do, like heart-lung bypass, but, you know, where the heart is stopped, but we still preserve brain function with bypass, but that's going down a whole other thing. We could talk about that for 3 hours. So I'd like to take a minute away from some of the heavier stuff to explore some of the superstitions around death. We'll talk about why these are important later. I polled some of my coworkers and an online group of highly trained nurses to get some of their most prominent superstitions that they had that have to do with death or dying. These are some of my favorite ones, and I tried to avoid some of the religious ones or ones that mention an afterlife. So death comes in threes. You may have heard this before. And then some people even said death comes in sevens, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot, but you know, hearing both. Some of the people on the group chat where I posted this were saying that in their practice they used to open a window when a person had died to let their soul escape. Now that, you know, let's not get into whether or not we think there's a soul. But I thought this was particularly interesting because at some point their hospital had replaced all the windows for safety reasons so that they didn't open, and the nurses made such a big deal out of this that they had to go back and put windows that opened. I'm like, wow, that's crazy that you would be so committed to this ritual that avoiding the number 13 or 666, I think medical professionals, you know, this is present in the regular population too, but sometimes we get a little bit superstitious in this way too with numbers. The same can be said for like a fear of the full moon, or thinking that full moon shifts would be busy or bring terrible outcomes. Medical professionals fear the words boring, quiet, or slow. We think that these words will tempt fate and bring in busy or dying patients. And then this last one is really interesting, that a patient can predict when they will die. And I'm not referring to a patient listing out like a specific date or time. I'm saying more like a patient may have a feeling that something is wrong and may ask questions like, will this kill me, and be serious about it. Or say, I'm going to die today. I've actually known surgeons or anesthesiologists that are willing to cancel entire surgeries and just send the patient home if they say anything like this. The interesting thing is that there have been studies that may support this theory might have some truth to it. The cause that's cited is that a patient who's about to die might experience like changes in their neurotransmitters, changes in their microvasculature, or inflammatory markers that kind of clues their body in, where they don't consciously know, but their body knows something's up. Then there are also medical emergencies like pulmonary embolism, tension pneumothorax, where there is actually one of the symptoms is a feeling of impending doom, and it's listed like that in medical textbooks, where a patient will be like, something is wrong, I'm gonna die. So anyway, that one is an interesting that may have some basis in truth, but. So let's move on to why are these important? Why do we have all these superstitions? Medical professionals are experienced in dealing with death. Most of us see it all the time. We confront death every day. So without ways of coping with death or explaining it, people burn out and can't continue to function. So we've developed all these superstitions and sayings that you saw on the last page to cope and give meaning to laws, explain it away. When you say death comes in threes, you're not as surprised or upset when 3 of the patients on the unit die. It's something that's expected based on how you've decided to cope with it. Medical professionals commonly use humor when dealing with death. It can be seen as crass or unfeeling, and the intention is never to laugh at the deceased. but the jokes help to lighten the mood and keep people from feeling upset so they can care for their other patients. I'm going to use some humor now in this presentation, a little bit, keeping the mood light as we try to address such a difficult topic. People who don't work in medicine do the same thing sometimes, though in different ways. Trying to explain the death that touches their lives. Many individuals use religion to explain death. They say God took them at the right time, or it's according to God's plan. Humanists obviously take issue with this explanation. So we often use any of the other methods that are listed here. I've included the 5 stages of grief because it's worth mentioning. Probably everyone has heard of these before: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I don't like the idea that everyone goes through the 5 stages in order, or that everyone reaches each stage while grieving. Grief can look different based on the individual, so some may experience these 5 stages. They may experience them out of order, or sometimes they don't experience them at all. So I don't like the whole 5 stages of grief thing. I think everyone grieves how they want to. I also find that there are some other better coping mechanisms without kind of breaking the process down into stages. Avoidance is another coping mechanism that I see a lot. Not the healthiest. I am guilty of this one. But it does have value in that it can allow us to compartmentalize our feelings and then address them when we feel it's appropriate. As long as you do eventually address those feelings and you don't just keep avoiding them forever. Finally, we get to some of the good coping mechanisms: sharing experiences, remembering the good times, or sharing core memories, and then keeping mementos and maybe displaying them. These ones pretty much explain themselves and are more of the healthier coping mechanisms, so it's probably why we include most of these in our funeral rituals. All right, so we've discussed how we cope with death, both in unhealthy and healthy ways, but most of what we talked about has to do with losing others around us. What can we do to develop a healthy relationship with death on our own? Why is that even important? Couldn't we just avoid the topic as long as we can until it's too late? We could, but not super healthy. One reason we don't consider death enough sometimes, I think, is that our typical experiences with death are usually negative. A family member or pet is acutely ill and will die soon, and the conversation is then clouded by emotions that we have and feelings of loss. So when that happens, we don't really get to reflect on death in itself without these troubling emotions kind of clouding it. That's why it's best to consider your death when you're in a healthy place mentally and emotionally, when there's no current threat to your life, and perhaps with someone you trust in order to exchange ideas. Change the conversation to a positive one, and you may have a healthier idea overall of death. Some thoughts to consider as you reflect on death. As we mentioned earlier, many religious perspectives attempt to give death meaning in the sense that it's part of God's plan, or that they promise some sort of afterlife that is better than this current one. Those who choose not to be religious might initially struggle with the idea of an afterlife or a reward for living well. Humanists need to consider that this life is all we have. There is nothing after death, so it's not really a beginning of a better life, but it is in fact the end. When considering death, know that you must live your life as you see fit, not living life to the fullest, in a sense, but live a life exactly how you want to live it. Remember, a couple months ago, Austin's previous talk on laziness or productive restfulness. If that's how you'd like to live, you should. Make the best of any challenges, because there are no do-overs. Our mortality can bring structure to our lives. Birth gives us a defined beginning point, and death is a defined end. We cannot remember before we were born, and will also have no concept of our lack of existence after we die. Our consciousness has a beginning and an end, so seek to organize your life around these points. Sorry about that. So taking this time to consider and taking the energy to resolve negative feelings regarding death can bring you peace and can help you further your purpose in life. So I'd like to share a quick story about a patient I encountered. This was when I was working in adult intensive care unit. I think he's an excellent example of making peace with death. It's kind of a funny story, even though it is about death. But so he was admitted to our ICU. He was a little bit older, I think 80s or 90s, and he had some sort of terminal diagnosis. I don't remember if it was cancer or something else. He was admitted to the ICU and he was awaiting a bed on the hospice floor, but they were full and they couldn't take him. So a couple days went by and he wasn't looking good, vitals were unstable, so we kind of let the family know, like, we think it's going to be time soon, just so you know, but we can get you set up in the room, we can get you like a cot and sheets and, you know, make you guys comfortable here. And they said, oh no, absolutely not, we're going home. And at first we were like, okay, that's a little weird. But they went on to say, like, he has an advance directive that he didn't want anybody around, especially his family, when he does pass. So we were like, okay, that's fine then, like, whatever you guys want. They left. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning. We had the monitors out at the desk, and we can, the rooms all have glass on. There's no walls, it's just all windows, so we can see him. And he's starting to not look good. Breathing is slowing down. And my coworker decides that she's going to go in there. She didn't want to watch him die alone, so she's going to go in there and hold his hand while it happens. And she walks in the room and takes his hand, and he like gasps, like, "Oh my God!" And like, kind of like his eyes flutter a little bit, and all his breathing stabilizes, his vitals stabilize, and he comes back-ish. And it startles her, and it scares all of us too, and we're like, wow, okay. So after a couple minutes, she comes back out, sits down at the desk, he looks better, she's like, okay, that was kind of weird. Same thing happens, his breathing slows, and she goes in there again, takes his hand, and he startles again, and comes back. Eventually, she came back out, and she stayed out at the desk, and he passed on his own. But what an amazing thing, he knew he didn't want anyone there, and as soon as she walked in every single time, he was like, nope, that's not what I want. So, he knew he didn't want an audience, and he waited till we left him the hell alone to go ahead and die. And we should strive to know ourselves this well, in my opinion, and know what you want with your death. So these are some additional readings on death and dying that I thought could be helpful as you're considering it. The first is the link to a blog post, and I forgot to look up how you say his last name, Andrew Copson. Does anyone know him? Yeah. He is the Chief Executive of Humanists UK and President of Humanists International, and he's written a lot of humanist books and articles. In this blog post, it's pretty short, but it pretty much sums up everything I said. And I actually found this resource as I was finishing up my presentation and was surprised how many points we both touched on. So a good review of what I talked about today. The second book is a longtime favorite of mine and addresses death in the context of the Vietnam War. It's very heavy, but has some great themes, especially about death. And then the last book, In Shock, is a recent book written by Dr. Oddish, she's an intensivist or an ICU physician at Henry Ford Main Hospital here in Detroit. And she talks about her personal brush with death and how it shaped the care that she gives her patients. It's a great read for anyone, but I'd say especially helpful if we have any other medical professionals here today, because she talks about some themes related to compassionate care of patients as well. Here's some links to references I use besides my own knowledge, and I'd like to open it up to any questions or comments before we move on to a brief reflection.
Do you believe we have a choice in when we die?
You said, do I believe we have a choice?
Yeah, I mean, I've had experiences where you're with somebody and maybe the wife comes to visit. When she leaves, that's when.
I'd say in certain situations, it seems that way. Whether that's a coincidence or not, I'm not sure. But you're right, I have seen that happen where people wait till a family member leaves, or they seem to be waiting for some arbitrary something, whatever it would be important to them. I'd say, if you ask me my personal opinion, I'd say yes. If you ask me my scientific opinion, I'd say it's not proven.
What are your thoughts on the right to die, like Canadian style, where they will give people, my opinion on it is that they are letting people die when the truth is they just really want something like a home to live in, or, you know, like their life is very difficult, and instead of, like, say the government or somebody helping them with it, with whatever it is that they're dealing with, they choose instead to die. And so my question is, like, what are your thoughts on people who just want to go? Do you think that it's like a reasonable expectation of them to continue to suffer, or should they be allowed to choose, I'm done with this, I'm ready to go? Is that okay?
I think people should be allowed to choose. But I think before you make that choice, it should, I mean, this would require like setting up a process, and I would hate to make people apply to die.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm going for either.
Yeah.
But addressing all those other needs, like you said, if they're more in need of stable housing, or if they're lacking like basic needs like food, clothing, shelter, then meeting those needs first before they continue to consider whether or not they want to die. And also meeting mental health needs. That would be like a better process. But I do think there are people who, depending on their situation, who absolutely should be granted the right to die, if they want to.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Patrick. I came in late. I wanted to just point out with that topic, I'm doing a master's degree in disability studies, and a really big thing within a lot of people that are involved in disability rights advocate that, like, if you're in a sound mind to make a decision of, like, I don't want to be in constant pain 24/7 anymore, and you have decided that that would be better than, like, dying would be better than in agony all the time, you should be able to make that decision. And like a subset of disability rights is like MAD Pride, which is like the mental health rights, and some people within that community extend it to you should be able to choose to commit suicide when you, for the same reason. That one has a lot more baggage involved with it, but I just thought I would point that out.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you. I think you summed it up a little bit better than I did. I think you were next.
Yeah, on the same topic, about assisted suicide, going back to Dr. Kevorkian and that. I am under the impression, I'm not sure how about this, that hospitals are tending to adopt religious policies that can interfere with your final wishes. And how can we protect ourselves? You know, how can you set up a contract saying, like, no heroic measures? You know, I don't want to be in iron lung, things like that. But you could end up in a hospital where they say, I'm sorry, we don't believe that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any hospitals in this area that would violate an advance directive. We do have religious hospitals, and I have intentionally never worked at any of them. I don't even want to go, I mean, like, again, I've never heard of them ignoring an advance directive in that way, at least in this area, but it may happen in other parts of the country, I'm sure. And that's crazy to hear. I can't imagine them saying, yeah, we're not going to follow your advance directive because we value your life more than you do or something. Yeah, that's crazy.
I wanted to comment on the title of this assembly, which is The Necessity of Death. It seems like the presentations didn't really cover that idea. But there is an idea in I think it would be considered transhumanist, that death is not a necessity, but it's a problem that we could in principle solve. Or that like medical science could in principle make people live indefinitely. Like that. I don't know, it seems like something that we should strive for, even if it's a really difficult problem.
Yeah, that could be. The one thing I worry about with that, not worry about, that would be great to see if we could live longer, or like extend our lifetimes even further than we have, like by a significant degree, live hundreds of years. Something we could look into, but as far as the necessity of death, it gives our lives a beginning, a defined beginning and end, I think. That if there is no end, is there really any motivation to live your life the way you want to, or to make sure that you're doing the things that you want to do?
I mean, if life has no end, then that's not motivation to stop living it. That's just more reason to live it.
You were going to say something about this?
Yeah, a lot of us here are old enough to remember Imelda Marcos and her 1,000 pairs of shoes. If I had 1,000 pairs of shoes, I really wouldn't care about this shoe or that shoe. If I had an infinite number of moments in my life, then each moment becomes valueless, because I know that I only have a certain number of moments left. That makes every moment, for me, a precious gift that I want to spend with loved ones, or doing something fun, or doing something meaningful like being here. Whereas if I knew I had an infinite number of moments forever, I wouldn't care what I was doing, because I've got an infinite number of moments. It reminds me of another aspect of this, of death being a healthy, natural, and generative part of a functioning world. Makes me think of what was relayed to me as a Native American story, where Death walked into the village and came to the longhouse where the grandmothers were meeting and said, "You grandmothers have the choice of if you want death to be in this world at all, or I will leave." And they said, "No, no, no, we want you here because we want children in our lives. You can have death and children, or you can have no death and no children, because the world is only so big."
Well, the universe is a lot bigger.
So if I could say, if we were immortal, we'd all die. You'd have 100 billion people on the planet. We would have eaten every tree, every rock. I mean, we would all die. So you kind of have to, and I think your point is well taken. If you're going to choose immortality, you cannot reproduce. Because then you just, we're infested. We need to spray the planet for this human infection.
I think Isaac Asimov has, I can't remember the name of this short story.
The last question.
Thank
Yes.
you.
First question's good.
Yeah, so that's it. I should have put that on my list. But yeah, that kind of follows along with the same themes that you were mentioning. Thank you. Bye. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to bring up this gentleman over here who's working on his master's, I think he said. hospice is a wonderful thing. Both of my parents died with hospice. It has many of my patients. I'm an RN as well, not a CRN. That's smart. That's smart. But hospice only really is functional for pain management. And I am a strong proponent of assisted suicide. I think that if you want to not live your life with the indignity of not being able to wipe your own bottom, you can't feed yourself, you can't roll over in bed, you can't do all the things that you want to do, even if your pain is managed, then that is a place for assisted suicide. And there should be no, I mean, I understand there has to be laws, but nobody should make that decision but the person, or an advance directive that they did it before. I mean, I have an advance directive and I talk about, I don't want to live like that routine. But now is the time, and it's time past for many of the people in the room to have their advance directives, have their trust, have their will. All that stuff should be done, because you don't know. We could all die on the way home. We're not given that choice of when we die unless we commit suicide. And to be able to have a good death, which is my goal, would be to have my loved ones around me, holding my hands, telling funny stories. And I did tell my son, I don't drink anymore, but I did tell my son that I would like to have the taste of Southern comfort on my mouth. When I go. So, I mean, it's all about what we want to do. And I think that one of the things that's, I just had an aunt die, and my mother's side of the family is very devout Christian. And it occurred to me that I think the reason people have faith was to answer many questions. What is thunder, whatever. They didn't know that stuff when all this crap started years ago. But I think the main thing now, Mary, is that they want to know that they can see their loved ones when they die. Mm-hmm. There's that heart-rending loss of my mother, my cousin's mother. And she was suffering and believed that she would die and see her mom again someday, or your favorite pet, or your grandmother, or whoever it was that you were close to. I think that's almost the defining purpose of religion, is to get that love back when they're gone, and part of me is just real pragmatic and with a little bit of sadness about the fact that I don't believe that. That's not going to happen. I believe you're born, you live, and you die. And to your point, John, you better be living well. That's all we got.
I agree with you with that sadness. And a lot of times what I try to think about instead of focusing on the sadness if someone's gone and they're never coming back is that how can I help them live on in a way? Like, what did they teach me? What did they, is it a skill? Did they teach me, my grandma taught me how to make bread, and so I still make bread, and I'll probably teach my kids. So that's my grandma living on, even though she isn't physically with us, and she never will be.
So I want to say, I just want to mention, you're basically talking about legacy, what you were saying. I want to touch on what this gentleman over here said. But you're kind of saying that it's kind of a paradox if everyone had like immortality, and the example you gave is kind of like the thing with the shoes, which I get your point. I've had like other people say the same thing. Like the whole idea of that is like if you have just one of something, you're gonna hold that more dear and precious and take care of it better than if you have like a million of these things. But I don't think it really like applies that much to memories, because as time goes on, like naturally all memories are gonna change over time, and you're not gonna like, you can't pick out like every memory you have and just like choose what you deem as most important. Your subconscious just is gonna kind of like remember this amount of things anyway, so I feel like that wouldn't really apply though, but
These are all great discussions to
I
have.
was gonna say one more thing I just want to touch And kind of what she was just talking about with like the whole like assisted suicide thing, like what kind of discussion on like what stage do we think is acceptable for when people should be able to choose, like is this pain and suffering too much, or I think it's you kind of touched on it on your slide, but you didn't go into it all the way. When we were talking about like the definitions, what death is, like when someone loses like who they are, I feel like that would be a good place to consider that.
I agree, and I think that also should be, in a way, up to the individual. Like, when do they think enough is enough, you know? And only them, yes, and, yeah.
But I wonder on the question of assisted suicide, if your problem can be solved, then you need to know that. I mean, there are people who do not know that they can solve it. Like, I've got this problem, my life sucks, I don't see a way out. But there is a way out. Maybe for terminal patients, that's not the case. But I think a lot of people choose it just because they're in emotional pain or, you know, a bad relationship.
Where assisted suicide is allowed, it's not allowed for personal reasons. But isn't it restricted to medical reasons?
I believe so. I believe you're right, that it's restricted to medical reasons.
But in Canada, you can just apply, and if your doctor and your psychiatrist or psychologist thinks that you've made a sound decision, then they will allow you, even if you're not sick. Like, that's what I was saying, like, you know, some people are just, I'm homeless, I'm tired of this. And instead of just addressing that issue, they're just going on ahead with the talks about death, talks about assisted suicide, instead of just like fixing the problem, which I think is it is an issue. I mean, this person has decided that this is what they want, and is it anyone's place to try to talk them out of it or say, okay, well, you know, we can do something about that, and they're just like, no, I've already made my decision. Do we force them to continue to live or to take their life on their own, or I don't know.
If this country were to, I don't think we're anywhere near that at this point in this country, but if we were to implement some sort of assisted suicide, I think, like you said, informed consent would be really important. Like, is there hope for improvement, or is the diagnosis truly terminal, or, you know, and then also, like we said before, meeting needs before making the decision. These are all good discussions. We'll take one more question, sorry guys, and then we'll have plenty of time to discuss amongst ourselves afterwards too.
You brought up a lot of things with like people that are mourning death of others for these stages of grief and stuff. Has there been any research or community whatever experience being a nurse that it's the opposite way, the stages of grief similar for someone who's been diagnosed with terminal illness, or like was it an accident, though they don't have long? Is there similarities to it? Is there something that that person experiences differently than someone who's mourning it, that actually is going to die?
Absolutely, I've seen similarities between,
Could you repeat the question? I didn't understand what you said.
Well, just like if someone who has a similar illness, or versus someone who's mourning someone who after going past, is the stages of grief, or how we mourn the same way? Do you mourn your own death the same way that others are mourning you, or is there something that's unique to that experience?
Yeah, I think I've seen people go through, kind of, like I said, the 5 stages of grief could definitely be applied to someone also receiving a terminal diagnosis, or knowing that I've been in a terrible accident and I know I'm going to die. But I've also never, seen people who skip the whole 5 stages, or go through one stage and then they're done, or they go through it out of order. It's so individualized, but absolutely those coping mechanisms are sometimes the same when you're dealing with your own mortality as opposed to other people's, or family members, loved ones. Thank you guys. And like I said, these are all great discussions. I hope that everyone continues to discuss discuss here while we're eating later. And sorry if I missed any questions or if we had to move on. I'd like to do a little bit of a reflection. So we'll just take a few minutes here. Set the timer. All right. So I want everyone to take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you wish. Settle both your feet firmly on the ground and place your hands palms up or palms down in your lap. Take another deep breath. Release any tension from your shoulders. Settle into a comfortable position. Breathe slowly and purposefully, savoring each breath. Consider for a moment your conception, gestation, and birth. When do you personally feel like your life truly began? Think about that moment. How would you have felt in that moment? Could you feel, hear, or see anything? Consider yourself a blank slate, experiencing everything for the first time. Take a deep breath. Consider your life thus far. Think of some of your high and low points. Take a deep breath. As you exhale, forget your past and present troubles. Relive your best moments. If you knew you were to die soon, what changes would you make in how you live your life? Consider your death. Where are you in that moment? Is anyone around you? And who are they? Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, let go of your fear of death. All is well, all is peaceful. There is no more worry, pain, or fear. Take comfort in the fact that you lived the life you wanted to live. Reflect for a minute and then open your eyes when you're ready.
Give one more round of applause for Mary. Alright, so I had one reading that I wanted to share with you all on the topic. Originally, I was going to do a little Epicurus because I feel like it was like my first introduction. But I did him last time, so we're not going to go there. We're going to mix it up. This one is from Richard Holloway. A sentence is not finished till it has a full stop, and every life needs a dying to complete it. It is dying that finishes us, that ends our story. When the map of our life is complete, and we die in the richness of our history, some among the living will miss us for a while, but the earth will go on without us, its days longer than ours, though we now know that it too shall die. Our brief finitude is but a beautiful spark in the vast darkness of space. So we should live the fleeting day with passion, and when the night comes, depart from it with grace. And that was from his book, Looking in the Distance, The Human Search for Meaning. Next up, we're going to have John come up and do our moment of wonder.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Great to spend this moment together.
It's
up here. Thank you. Yeah. Great. I'm going the wrong way. All right, hunter-gatherers. We're going to spend a moment to step back into the Paleolithic here. And I just wanted to check. A lot of people are familiar. How many people are familiar with hunter-gatherers as an idea, as a way people can live? Right. Okay, hunter-gatherers, you hunt and you gather food. And as many of us know from the understanding of hunter-gatherings, that these societies we've heard were very often gender segregated, where the males would go and do the hunting and the females would do a lot of the gathering, right? How many people have heard of that general conception, right? It turns out that we get better and better information in science as we get more and more evidence. And we've gotten a lot of evidence on this. It's been really, really cool. We found evidence from two main sources. One of them, if we want to take a look at hunting in the Paleolithic and Neolithic used tools. It would have been really nice to hunt with guns, or even the compound bow that I used for archery back then. Our ancestors were not nearly so fortunate as to have those things. They didn't even have the bow and arrow until a lot more recently than the longest stretches of the Neolithic and Paleolithic. If you look back then, you say, okay, they hunted with what, right? Stone tips here, and what are these curvy things up here? That is an atlatl. How many people have ever heard of an atlatl? Okay, a few people. An atlatl is an amazing thing. If you're going to throw a spear, like this at an animal, it's really hard to throw it hard enough to bring the animal down, and really hard to have the distance. These animals can run. A deer gets going, and boy, you better throw quick or it's going to be gone, right? If you can throw this a lot farther, then there's a big advantage to that. And it turns out there's a very, very simple technology right here, and we found a lot of these, that makes it work a lot better. And that's an atlatl. If you take the atlatl and hold it like this, and then, actually, Joe, can you come up here real quick? And throw it like this, okay? Let's see if you can just hold that right like that, and throw it like this. So you throw it right, throw it right like this. You can throw it a lot farther and a lot faster. It's really amazing. If you can do this with just sticks, right? Just basic sticks with a little hook on the end. If you try it, I was showing kids at a camp this. It's unbelievable. You throw the stick and you're like, oh yeah, I can throw the stick that far. And you take something like this and you put it out and you're like, whoa, right? Unbelievable. So we find these things. We find these in burials. People are buried with their hunting tools, with a whole hunting toolkit that includes the tips of the spears and various tools that you would use to flesh the animal and the atlatl. And the neat thing is, if these have a skeleton, now we can start to look at the DNA sometimes, if we're lucky enough to be able to get DNA out of that. If you get the DNA, you can find out the gender. So, what it turns out, and by the way, you can look at this and say, what percentage of burials with a hunting kit in them, often tied to a leather pouch on the waist, the leather's long gone, but you can still see the kit, right? Were women. About 40%. Wow. Wow. And by the way, if you ever want to check a reference, I try not to say things that are false, and I usually put my reference down in the corner. 40% women hunting was very, very common. Okay, now let's try another thing. An important thing in science is to try to answer a question by more than one direction, right? If you can get the same answer using multiple lines of evidence, it's a lot more powerful, right? So let's look at descriptions of hunter-gatherer societies by people who experienced them before they were wiped out. There's still some, and in the 1700s there were even more, right? When we look carefully at the descriptions that people had, right? When we look carefully at the descriptions of hunter-gatherer societies all around the world, here, how many of them mention women hunting?
40%.
80%. Wow. Wow. So, just to go back, I think the idea of only men doing the hunting, I think that has a little bit of a patriarchal influence, and now we're starting to see that it's not exactly correct. With that, thank you.
Isn't it necessary that women do the hunting? Because they can't get the guy off the out.
So, another big announcement we have for next year is that we're going to start doing this a whole lot more often. And we are moving to a monthly assembly schedule. So for the second Sunday of every month, moving forward, we're going to be doing this assembly and potluck. So we are really looking forward, to how well things have been going. I mean, if you just look around, you can see the room's nice and full, compared to a year ago where we weren't even having any of these. So we're just, we're really excited that, turnout's been so great, and yeah, we're going to try and take it to the next level.
Joe, how can we as members support the food that Sunday Assembly provides, the meat and all that? So how can we, I know you don't want to charge for the potluck, but how can we be supportive of that financially? Because meat isn't cheap, my God.
That's right. So just so happens, we have a slide where we're going to talk about this. Yeah. So we do have some fundraising goals. Yes, on the center of all of your tables, we have a sheet with QR code where you can go and find the various avenues that we have for donating. Here we go. So through PayPal is the one we've had set up the longest. I did have somebody come up to me earlier today. Do you want to come up here, Anthony? You had the spiel planned, so I don't want to step on your toes. Come on up, since I didn't actually prep any of this. But yes, thank you for asking that.
Maybe cover that stuff real quick so that.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, while Anthony's coming up, we do have, in addition to our assemblies that are coming up. We have a Kwanzaa New Year's Eve celebration going on this year. Dr. Ann Burton's going to come and give us show us some rituals that she uses to practice that celebration. And it is currently slated to be at Anthony's house. If it gets big enough, we have an alternate arrangement set up. So just let us know if you guys are interested in coming, because if it's really, really successful, we might have to change venues. We have in January, he wasn't able to make it tonight, but one of our members, Steve, he's going to be giving us the talk on interfaith family. And we also have book club at the end of January as well. Without further ado, here's Anthony to tell you about our fundraising goals for next year.
How's everybody doing? Lively, hopefully?
Nice and
All right. So a middle-aged man goes to the doctor. Doctor says, I got bad news for you. Today's your last day alive. There's nothing we can do. Tonight, when you go to sleep, it'll be your last day. Well, on the drive home, he goes through his 5 stages and he accepts it. He tells his wife, honey, get dressed in your finest clothes. Tonight, we're going out and having the nicest dinner at our favorite restaurant. We're gonna order the nicest meal, we're gonna drink the finest champagne, we're gonna celebrate our marriage and our life. Then, we're gonna go out dancing at the hottest nightclub in town. Wherever the kids are going these days, that's where we're going, and we're not leaving the dance floor. We're gonna be dancing all night long. Then, at the end of the night, at the wee hours of the morning, when all the clubs and bars are closed and everybody's asleep, we're gonna take a romantic walk on the beach. We're gonna lay down on the sand. I'm gonna make love to you one last time. I'm gonna hold you in my arms, and we're gonna watch the sun rise together. What do you think? Well, that sounds good for you, but I got work in the morning. We're still working on our sense of humor. I was hoping to end it at least on a positive note. Yes, unfortunately, death is inevitable for everybody, and that's why I believe we're here for a good time, not a long time. I have relatives that lived to be in their 90s and 100s, and some relatives that didn't make it that long. So I think it's best to celebrate life every single day. That's why we exist. That's why the Sunday Assembly exists. We celebrate life. Who enjoys celebrating life with like-minded people? Who has fun sitting next to somebody that is literally the exact opposite of them in every possible way? No, I'm not talking about marriage. I mean, sometimes you're like, okay, listen, you have your ideologies, but do you really have to push them? No. We voluntarily come here. I voluntarily do this. I voluntarily cook, and I voluntarily set up electronics, and then we put this online for others to share. This is a great room. We're filling up this room very nicely. Joe mentioned earlier that a year ago our numbers were small. We're growing. I did the math. We have about 40 people here, and we got about 5 or 6 kids outside. Not everybody can always make it, but that's understandable. I see some new faces and some old faces, and that's very comforting. But we need to get the word out that we exist. Earlier, Mary was talking about the 5 stages of grief. Well, in marketing, there's something called the 5 stages of the decision-making process. Every single one of us goes through this every time we decide anything, from the clothes we put on today, to the person we go out with, to the traditional example of going out to lunch. Step 1 is need recognition. I'm hungry. Where should I go eat? If you're like me, Subway always pops into my head every single day, so it's either Subway and Panera, or Subway or Zoop, or Subway or Coney. Everybody has their choice. Step number 2, that initial response. Step 3, alternative evaluation. Okay, well, where else should I go? Because I had Subway yesterday, so maybe someplace else. Step 4 is making the purchase or the action. And finally, step 5 is post-purchase evaluation. You ever buy something or ate something, you kind of felt guilty afterwards? Oh, maybe I shouldn't have had it. It sounded really good, but maybe a greasy cheeseburger Tuesday afternoon, not such a good idea, because I still got to go back to work. We're no different. We provide a great service for a lot of people to have a warm, safe, comforting community, and there's a lot of people out there that want the same thing. We don't live in a one traffic light town. We live in metropolitan Detroit. Southeast Michigan, the greater Metro Detroit area, has a population of 4 million. We have 40 people in this room. There's a lot of people like us out there who may not know that they have a choice besides the traditional congregations, whatever they grew up with. Maybe some people are actually so depressed that all they have is the traditional congregations that people do take their life because they don't feel like they have a community to support them. That's why we exist, to support as many people as we possibly can, as best as we can. And things cost money. We donate as much as we can. We don't ask for you to pour out all your bank account to us. This is not some pyramid hierarchy where you will achieve status the more you donate. We're not promising you the afterlife. We're not guaranteeing you anything other than we are going out and trying to bring new people in, like everybody has to come in here somehow. Who discovered us on Meetup? Okay, Facebook? What other, okay, I know you guys, I remember meeting you guys at Deli at the Alley, and I was going to bring that up where that was a festival that goes on every year in September, and there's a lot of festivals similar to that. We did a Bourbon Fest, there's Pride, there's lots and lots of different ones, and what we're trying to do is bring people in from these places. They go out, they're looking for a good time, that's what we do. We go out and we have a good time. Cuisine and conversation, wine with Ted, knowledge sharing sessions, the assembly. We have road trips. Last year we tried to put together a Cedar Point trip. Not as many people wanted to go, that's fine. Maybe next year more people want to go. Next year we're thinking about doing a wine tour of Traverse City. Who likes to do that? Yeah. Only one driver though, promise. We're hosting a New Year's party at my house. Now, I don't have a super big house. I have a big backyard, which was one of the selling points of my house, was I can have a lot of people in my backyard, but it's great for parties in the summertime. Unfortunately, New Year's in our culture is in January for whatever stupid reason. I'm sure John can give a whole speech about that. You know, why is it that December, which technically means the 10th month, is the 12th month? I'm sure John has an answer for that. So, yes, we are hosting a party at my house. We can fit about 20 to 25 people comfortably, and about 5 to 6 children in my daughter's room. Anything more than that, we really have to get a bigger space. This is a bigger space. We can rent this out, but it costs money. It's not going to me, it's not going to the assembly, it will go just to rent this place out and it will be fully catered, if that's what people want. If we can bring 100 people in, renting the space out is $20 a person. If we can get 100 people in and you can donate to $20 a person for New Year's, then maybe an additional $10 or $15 for fully catered. We'll take care of everything. Obviously, it's close to that time. I'm not asking for a response now, but it would be good if you can message us, let us know what's going on. Any questions about what I've been talking about so far? Because I don't want anybody to lose track or anything.
Well, I do have a question.
Yeah.
And I've presented this before on Meetup. Wine with Ted is worthless to me because I don't know the topic. I'm not going to go to, I've been to the man's house, he was very nice. There were a bunch of young men sitting around and everybody's watching this show that I have no interest in. And I don't know about exactly how Ted works, but if you can do wine with Ted, and this is going to be the topic 1 and topic 2, because my understanding is they view 2 hours, or I shouldn't say 2 hours, 2 presentations. Mm-hmm. Then I would know whether I want to drive all the way down to where I live, from where I live. You know, but I don't have any data. I need data. I'm a data search person.
I think that's a very reasonable request. Hey, what am I going to see? Because it's not like, hey, movie theater, here's my money, give me a ticket to something. I agree. And absolutely, we should probably have these topics up and we'll take care of it. See, this is the good thing about the community we have. We're not here to say, whoa, we're back here behind the curtain deciding everything and y'all just stay on the yellow brick road and do whatever you're told. We're not that congregation. We don't do that sort of stuff. We're building a community. And I think right now is the best time to do that because we're coming out of a pandemic. And right now, everything has been shaken up, especially in America. Because America was basically surviving on duct tape and Band-Aids for about 50 years. What are we up to now? $31 trillion in debt? Something like that. There's been a lot of issues, I'm not going to get political, but there's been a lot of issues in America. And if anybody follows sports, specifically golf, you might notice that the Saudi Arabia, they have been buying up all the golfers, and they're literally spending hundreds of millions of dollars for each one. Anybody who follows the business world of music, you might notice that there's a lot of people selling off catalogs, their music catalogs. The Red Hot Chili Peppers sold theirs off. Even people who bought like the Beatles from a long time ago. They're selling them off because everything's getting liquidated. In the business world, a lot of people are liquidating stuff to get cash to invest somewhere else, and it doesn't seem to be in America. So there's going to be a giant void of camaraderie, of people coming together, because we don't know what the future looks like. Everything happens like in 50-year kind of intervals. So the 50 years after the Civil War, like 1870 to 1920 was the building of America. Then 1920 to 1950s was an even bigger uprising of America. And then kind of 1970s to 2020 kind of was a plateau period, really, where America was built up. Yes, obviously 90s were really great, 80s were up and down. But right now we're really changing in America, and I think humanism in general, and stepping away from traditional congregations, is going to be the wave. So with donations, it goes so that we can let people know that this is happening. You are investing in your own community. This is not a job for myself, for Joe, for Victoria, for anybody. We volunteer all of our time. So it can be something as small as $10, $20 a month. We appreciate whatever you can. We did set a goal that we were hoping that if we get $200, obviously not everybody can afford that, that's understandable. Whatever you can donate is appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what Anthony was referring to, the $200 was like collectively, if we could get, $200 in recurring donations every month, that would meet our projected budget for the assemblies for the next year. So to give you exact numbers, that's what that 200 is. And then yeah, with that, I believe now is time for food. So yeah.
Hey, one more thing.
Yeah, sure. What's up?
You guys made any of those paintings up there?
I do believe those are. Do we? Yeah.
Well, I think that was from the last knowledge sharing session, the paint with lead or something.
Right.
Okay, I got it. Short jokes with this crowd. Attention span, got
Our names on the back. You'll see there's one up there that's all white. That's I think it's like polar bear in a snowstorm. So there is a name on the back of that one, but there's no paint on the front. So anyhow.
It's a pie chart representing procrastination.
Yeah. But yeah, take them with you for painting.
Yeah, if you were at that event.
You wouldn't believe.
All right, as far as the food part goes, we have everything is divided equally on both sides, so you can come in from both sides and help yourself so that we don't create a bottleneck or anything else like that.